Female Finance Collective, where we encourage women to have open and honest conversations about money. Today, we're going to continue our financial literacy series. So we've already talked about beginners financial literacy, kind of the middle or intermediate levels of financial literacy and what you need to know. And today, we're going to share with you some wealth-building financial literacy skills and strategies. And we're going to talk about why they're important. All of our Female Finance Collective episodes are really about financial literacy, but we want to get really clear on kind of those advanced moves in this episode. We want to remind you that personal finances are highly personal, and there are many aspects to consider. We're sharing information for educational and conversational purposes only. We're not giving specific advice. We're here to share what's working for us and our ideas, and hope that it's helpful to you. So let's start by talking about lifestyle creep a little bit. So here we are at this advanced stage. What that means is that we've already got some systems in place around our money management. We've got some extra money that we have found and made for ourselves, kind of in a bucket that we could use to make money from the money, right? As we kind of see that extra money starting to add up in our accounts, many of us might start to also have lifestyle creep. And what lifestyle creep is really as you make more money or as you're saving more money, you actually end up spending more money as well. So we're going to kind of talk about, do you want to go extreme and to just save and invest and build wealth for your future? Maybe get on the FIRE movement? Or do you want to add in a couple more luxuries and start saving and investing? There's lots of ways it could go, and really the decisions are yours. So we're going to share with you some ways that we have built wealth ourselves and are thinking about as we move forward. Jen or Marilee, do you want to get us started with some thoughts about that?
So I self-identify as being in the wealth build stage, a decision I had to make around lifestyle creep. And it was specific to receiving a larger than expected tax refund. So I put more into my retirement account and I was getting this large tax refund. And I was weighing two choices. One was to buy a second vehicle and the other was to buy a rental property. And definitely buying the second vehicle, that would be that lifestyle creep. We didn't really need one, but it was as being the better option. And that's definitely worked out in terms of wealth building. That car at this point would be worth practically nothing, but the rental property has increased probably 2 or 3 times the price that I had originally paid. But it's hard. It's hard in the moment to choose investing versus definitely doing some thinking and crunching the numbers, and combining the two is helpful.
I'm just going to say, Marilee was cutting out quite a bit there. And so I maybe could recap it to make sure that our listeners can hear that. So Marilee, what I caught there was that you were deciding between buying a second car or buying an investment property. And you actually chose the investment property. And glad you did, because that's going to build you more wealth in the end, where the car would have been a little bit more on the lifestyle creep, just something you didn't need and wasn't going to benefit your future as much. Is that correct?
Exactly.
And I think that is a temptation that a lot of us have faced at different times. And maybe if we could go back in time, some of us would change what we chose to spend our money on or how we invested. But I think that it's really important for us to have this conversation, because at this point I think I would also consider myself at the wealth building stage, like Marilee said. And at this point, there are times still when my husband and I have these conversations like, is this the best way to be spending our money? And we have found that we have to really decide between enjoying our life now and also planning for the future. We don't want to live our life right now with such a tight budget that we feel restricted, that we feel like we're missing out on some fun things, missing out on, spending time. Mostly what our miss outs feel like is travel. I mean, that's the thing that we love the most, like spending time with our friends and family, and seeing new places and trying new things. And so we do kind of balance between what is the most I'll use this word cautiously, responsible choice. It's responsible for us. That doesn't mean that it's everybody else is irresponsible if they spend away or not. But that's kind of the way we think about it. Is this responsible? Are we thinking about our future and planning for it? Or are we living too much in the moment? Or are we somewhere in between? And I think that is really the challenge, right? For a lot of people is deciding where you fall, where things lie, and like what category you want to put different amounts of money into. Are they for the fun? Are they for the future? And I don't know about you guys, but sometimes it's really hard to choose.
Yeah, absolutely. I can totally relate to that. It's such an ongoing battle, right? Sometimes, like, my husband and I look at this conversation and he's like, I didn't do that because I didn't want to spend the money. And I'm like, that's something we need to spend money on. We need to cut back somewhere else, right? Like, you kind of almost get this mentality of, I want to be sure I can invest X amount. I want to be sure that I can, retire at this age. And sometimes for me, it's like too much. That's like, okay, you got to check yourself. Like you said, Jen, you also want to live the good life right now. And so, it's really that balance, and then constant communication is what I find. That, like, my husband and I just have to constantly talk about that. And yeah, you felt that way at the moment in the grocery store, but next time, you won't make that sacrifice that saved you $2 for our investment account, right? Like, it didn't really match up. But really just thinking about how your money can make more money for you, right? And so that idea that if you do put money into an investment account or into real estate, into some kind of a place where the money is going to grow, investing, right? That money can work for you. It can make more money while you sleep, right? Rather than trading time for money all the time and then spending it or investing it, right? So really having that long game, I think perspective on your wealth building is important, to also balance it with that constant challenge of, how much am I going to spend right now in the life I want to live now? Yes, that trip is really important to me. We also, a big part of our savings goes to travel. That's an important part for us. And so it's little bits over the months to pay for that big trip, right? And so it is a constant, like, struggle and thing you need to work on. But by the time you're in the wealth building stage, you are pretty financially literate and it's a part of your life. You have money routines, most likely. It's a part of the way you think and do things, right? And so if your brain is not really thinking about the future yet, there's probably some thinking to do back in some other stages of, like, okay, I'm not really ready to control my spending right now for my future. So what do I need to put in place to make that happen so I can start making my money work for itself and build? Because it's all about compound interest, isn't it? It's all about, the everyday adding more and more and more. And the stock market, yes, it goes up and down, but over history, it always goes up, right? And so knowing that, and trusting and believing in investing now will benefit you in the future. But there's just that constant battle, isn't there?
There is. And I wanted to mention that these tools aren't easy. You just have to weigh the math with also what you want in your life. The hardest thing with planning for our money is we don't know how long we'll live. So you want to make sure that you're taking care of yourself, investing in your health, as well as investing in your future.
That is a really good point, and we have had this conversation also. So that reminds me of two things, Mary Lee. I remember you saying that every year you choose something to invest in, and this year or last year, this year was your health. And so you were like, you were sort of giving yourself permission to spend in that category as, like, for the now, but also kind of for your future, right? Planning on your health. And then also, like, we don't know how long we're going to live. And so that, I think, also plays into your decision-making factors, and, like, that kind of enjoy life while we can, but also plan for, what if I live until, I was thinking about this the other day, what? My grandma is 95, you guys. And I was like, what if I live until I'm 95? Like, do we have enough money for two of us to like live until we're 95? And stuff like that can really get your brain thinking in different directions. So that's why I think it's so important to like have like sit down and like Sybil was saying, have the conversations. And if you're a single person, find a friend to kind of talk it out with, because it's a hard thing to sort of talk out with yourself. So just find a friend or a family member and be like, I gotta talk out like my future and what I think is important now, what I want to be important then. And then those decisions about long-term investing, I think kind of come into, they get a little bit clearer when you think about that, right? And like the balance of, and do you guys have percentages? Do you think in terms of percentage, like this percentage goes for now, this percentage goes for my future? We don't have specific percentages, but maybe that would make it easier. I think we kind of do it in the moment, thinking about, oh, this would be a good amount of money to invest in like this property or in our accounts or whatever.
Yeah, I don't know if it's quite percentages. I'm sure I could figure out what the percentage is, but we have an allocated amount that we invest into the stock market, into our brokerage account or our IRA or HSA, whichever. We kind of have an order of how we invest, right, across a year. And we definitely automate that. So every single month, as soon as we get, a paycheck, my husband's in this case is the most consistent. It comes on a certain day where mine's more variable. Right after we get that salary payment, the next day it's invested. I learned to do it the next day, not the day of, because of banking issues. The next day we have a certain amount that gets invested every single month. And so that's automated. It goes away. We're paying ourselves first. And then we live on the rest, right, which is budgeted for our month. And then if we have extra at the end, maybe I brought in a little more income or, different things happen, we spent less or whatever. We also try to invest that into the stock market, or like at this time, we're looking to possibly purchase some real estate. So I would invest that extra instead of into the stock market into a high yield savings account where we're kind of keeping some cash on hand for if the perfect property comes up for us to house hack, then we'll have some of that cash ready to go. We won't have to withdraw it from the brokerage account. So not quite a percentage, but definitely a set amount every single month that automatically comes out first, and then we live and spend the rest.
So I had a similar order of operations when I worked in corporate and had a salary, and I chose 20%. So I had a set percentage because I'm a planner. I did the math and the retirement projections. So I did 20% of my pre-tax salary, and that went into mostly retirement accounts. And this is what I see for people in the wealth building stage is they start to track some different metrics. So savings rate, so the percentage of your income that you're saving is a great one. Tracking your net worth, so it's everything you own less everything that you owe. That's another great one. And there's lots of other metrics. Some people track their income growth. So it gets a little more analytical as well. And that data can help you make different decisions with your finances. So definitely as wealth builders, that's kind of the introduction of some more numbers gets helpful.
I really like to track my net worth. That number feels like good to me, and to watch it and like intentionally, because I do, although it's automated what we're investing, I also want to try to invest a little bit more each month, not every single month, but maybe like quarterly. I might change it up a little bit. If you think about it, if you invest 1% more every month for a year, after a year, you're investing 12% more. Like, that's a lot. And 1% might not feel like a huge amount each month if you do it like that. But that net worth number helps me with investment into real estate as well.
I think this is a good conversation because we're just kind of like sharing different things that we do and ways we think about things. So part of, I think, what moves us from that foundation building stage to the intermediate to wealth building is starting to think like this. Because when I was in the foundation building and probably even in intermediate, I didn't think about building wealth. Wealth was like a word that did not apply to me, would never apply to me. And so I didn't think about like how to live this way, how to think this way, how to plan this way. I was really living in the like day-to-day, paycheck to paycheck, kind of lifestyle, which I think we've talked about this before. A huge percentage of the population is living that paycheck to paycheck lifestyle. And they may be listening to us thinking, wealth building, absolutely not. Like, I am not there, excuse me, nor do I think I will ever be there. But maybe starting to think forward into these kinds of conversations in listening to us talk about how we think about investing, how we think about saving our future, how we think about spending, because I'm sure all of us we've all talked about spending at different times. Sometimes spending feels fine to me and I'm like, I don't care. Like, we really want this thing and we're going to spend on it. And other times we're like, nope, we got to hold it back. And I think the good stuff comes in that balance, right? And so that's part of what the foundation and the intermediate steps are about, figuring out that balance for you and what that feels like and what you wish you had versus what you do have. And I don't mean what you wish you had, like, as far as stuff and things, but like maybe the freedom to make choices financially, because that's something that I know a lot of people are lacking. So what do you guys think takes you from, let's talk about what took us from intermediate people to like considering ourselves wealth builders, because I can think of some pretty specific things we started to do. So what do you guys think? Marilee, what's something you did?
So what I did is I started to diversify. So I bought, I'd always invested in the stock market, but I started to look at real estate. So I bought a rental property for rental income. And I started to diversify the types of accounts that I was investing in. So at the beginning, it was mostly retirement. And then it became, helping my kids with an education fund and also non-registered investing. So just adding different types of accounts. So there were more moving parts, but there was also more different income streams. So that really started to make me feel like an investor. So I identified as an investor. I was reading, I had worked in the industry. I was helping clients with this, but it had a different meaning when I was doing it for myself. And I also started to think more about the future. So I started to look at my estate planning, making sure that my will, my beneficiary designations met, what my wishes were if something happened. Before, I didn't have a lot of money. That was never, the number one consideration. But I started to shift to planning for those types of decisions as well.
When I started making more money, I right away started, just kind of knew somehow, I guess from my childhood and raising, that I needed to invest in the stock market, but I had never done it before. We were definitely living paycheck to paycheck. I was a half-time teacher. My husband was a teacher. And then suddenly I was making some more money, and all I knew to do was to talk to a relative and find a financial advisor that could invest the money for me. I knew I needed to do something with this extra money, but that's all I knew. And so I did that for probably about a year to a year and a half. Before I found Andrew Helm's book, Millionaire Teacher. And that book taught me that I could actually invest on my own. I was paying this guy 2-point-something% of all my money every single day, right? And that was a huge aha moment for me. Obviously, I didn't go from him to investing on my own overnight. I did a lot of reading, a lot of learning, but I all of a sudden had a focus, like, okay, I can do this myself. This teacher also did this himself, and I can learn how to do it. And then it's going to feel scary, and it was very scary, but I took that over, and that was really where I started. Now, is it the perfect way? No. Like, later I learned about IRAs and fully funding those and things like that, right? Like, in theory, I should have done those first. And then like a regular brokerage account. I was also overseas, and so that complicates things or gives you less or different options. But for me, it was just that, and that's okay. I knew I needed to invest this money, so I gave it to somebody else until I realized I could do this myself. So that's really where I transitioned into living paycheck to paycheck to, okay, I'm going to invest some more money. And we can talk to Jen about how we make more money, because later in my career, after I've been investing for a little while, we also got into real estate, but also like some side gigs. Actually, early in my career, Jen and I met at a school here in Parker, Colorado, and she was teaching graduate level and undergrad level classes at the University of Phoenix. And I heard about that, and I was a part-time teacher and young kids, and I was like, oh my God, that's like the perfect side gig, because it's like 6 to 10 p.m. When the kids are asleep already. So I actually learned from you, Jen, how to get my first side gig to make a little extra money. Well, I kept my part-time teaching job because that's all I really wanted during the days.
I think, so this side gigs are so interesting, right? So I was thinking about this. It must have been like a year ago. I was working on like my resume and I was thinking about things. And I was like, I have had 2 jobs for, there was a recent stretch where we were moving a lot, but the whole time I was teaching, basically, I had 2 jobs. But at one point, those 2 jobs were literally keeping me afloat, like closing the gap between paychecks. And because, as I've shared before, I was having to put a chunk of money every month towards my debt. So even if I just paid the minimum payment, that was still a chunk of money, right? So my 2 jobs and my side hustles were really just keeping me afloat and like letting me still sort of enjoy life, and not like, I used to joke about eating top ramen and watching TV, and that was like the only things I could do because I had money for nothing else. But then as you start to get more into that intermediate thing, as you start to get that debt either paid off or really under control, the side hustles become a whole different thing, right? Now a side hustle or a side gig or what, like there's lots of terms I think flying around right now for them. Now I don't think of them like that, like the way I used to. I kind of think of them as now an additional stream of income. So the hustle to me was like hustling to keep myself afloat. And now I'm like, oh, this extra job is like an additional income stream. So what am I going to do with this income stream? I started to think about that money coming in a whole different mindset. And I attended, so I will say this, and then I'm going to like throw out a little like asterisk. We attended like a wealth building seminar. The one we attended I thought was really well done. It did not, the asterisk is, do not attend a seminar or take advice. This is strong words I'm choosing, I hear myself. That just tells you there's only one right way to do things. So if you go to a seminar and the person says the only way to live is this, and this, and then you walk away feeling like, oh God, I have to do these things, then I personally think that is not a good wealth building seminar or wealth building information. What they should be doing is sharing with you lots of different options, because people build wealth in lots of different ways, and we have to figure out what works well for us. So we attended one that we just had the opportunity to go to. And what I loved about it is it was like all these different very successful people sharing what their wealth building strategy was. So you could sort of take bits and pieces from each person. There wasn't like a right or wrong way to do it. And that's when we also started to think about creating additional streams of income for ourselves outside of our regular jobs. So that's when we also own a rental property. All 3 of us own rental properties. So that's when we bought ours, because investing in real estate made sense to us. And that's when I started. In that seminar, somebody said to become, I can't remember what term they used, but like financially free. A lot of those people have like 7 streams of income, and 7 seems huge. But when you start to think about like my investment income, my regular job, my rental property, this side gig I do like once a month, I do this, it starts to make sense to you and you really think about that money in a different way, the money coming in, than you did at the different levels of kind of financial literacy.
Completely agree. That multiple stream of income, once I realized that I could build, dividends and capital gains and then short-term rental, it was like, okay, this makes so much sense. And the statistics are really wild. The wealthiest people definitely don't only have one stream of income. There's no doubt about that. And then there's like the conversation about how passive it is, how much you're trading time for money, or it's happening while you sleep, right? But it's a really, for me, a fun place to be. Like, to be able to like dream up what you want to do and then figure out a way to do it. We are living in the best time ever for side gigs. The internet is our oyster, right? Like, people, a lot of people, it takes a lot of work, don't get me wrong, but it's also an opportunity that a lot of us have, pretty equal access to these days, to trying to build something online with social media and that kind of thing as well. So completely agree.
Well, and that's something we're all doing. We're all pursuing a business. So that's another great way to build wealth. When I worked in the investment space, entrepreneurs were some of the wealthiest clients. They were able to build their wealth through growing a business and doing some additional planning, like tax planning and trust structures and things like that. So it definitely opens up more wealth building opportunities to have a business. But as Sybil shared, it is not for the faint of heart, and it can be a lot of work to get things set up. So you do have to consider how much time and energy you want to put into any investments that you make.
Yeah, there's not really a get rich overnight scheme, in my opinion. If it's advertised that way, it might be too good to be true, right? Like, I'm sure it happens to some people. There are lotto winners and different people that get invited into business opportunities that might happen. But for the most of us, it really isn't for the faint of heart. You really got to decide it's a passion area, and you're gonna, like wealth building, play the long game, right? You need to go after it and do it for a while. But what an exciting place to be. I mean, authoring my first book, and now I've got a journal out. Like, is it making me a ton of money? No. But is it building credibility? Is it building my audience? Is it building my ideas and my passions and my joy and my ikigai? Absolutely. And it's taking me places. And so it's a pretty cool place to be, for sure. So remember, we'd love to hear from you. Please send us your thoughts and questions, and be sure to like and subscribe our podcast. We're so glad that you're here and have been listening. We look forward to chatting with you more, and we don't want you to miss any episodes. So please follow along and let us know any questions you have as well, because we would love to answer them right here on our podcast. Take care.